here's my confession to all of you. About 80% of what we deal with is total garbage. I don't know another way to put it. I mean, it's like, Verizon fighting with AT&T, Cox fighting with Comcast. And I don't much care, maybe I shouldn't say that, but when it's just businesses fighting with each other to try to get an advantage over one another, those aren't the issues that matter to me. I'm 31 years old. I'm one of the youngest members of the legislature. And I want to look at the reforms we can put in place that will help us have a stronger future, the things that really matter. That's why I care about education. That's why I care so much about the children in our communities that have developmental disabilities like autism and Down syndrome, because if we really focus on those things, our education system, our criminal justice system, I think that's where we create the strong building blocks for the type of future that we really want to have in our state. And I wanted to end before taking questions by telling you what I think was maybe the most significant thing that happened in the last legislative session. And it wasn't a bill, it wasn't an amendment, it wasn't even a vote. And I hope I don't offend anybody with this story, but we had a group of legislators that said to the Speaker of the House that they didn't want us to use the name of Jesus Christ in our prayer in the morning, that they thought that was offensive. And the Speaker was thinking about not letting whoever came to be the pastor of the day use Jesus' name. And there was a bunch of us that said, Mr. Speaker, no one's required to show up for the prayer, but we don't think that as Christians we ought to be prejudiced against and not be able to pray in the name of Jesus Christ. And I'm so proud to tell you the Speaker agreed with us, and we can still use that name on the floor of the House of Representatives of our state. So I think that's probably more important than any bill we pass, just being able to make sure that we have the right focus. Like I told y'all, I'm only 31. Every day all I do is learn how much more I don't know. But as we get to know each other better, and I think we will over the next few years, I really hope you'll keep in touch with me and help me on these issues where I think we can find a lot of common ground and work together. My email address is pretty easy to remember. It's just matt@mattgaetz.com. I'll make sure to have all my contact information here with the folks at the Chamber. And if there's anything I can do for you, you've got a far better representative than me right now in Marty Colby. But if she ever needs backup on something where I can help her, I hope you'll use me to be able to do good things for our community. Thank you all so much for having me this morning. We have time for a few questions or comments, suggestions, criticism. As my dad always says, softly thrown vegetables. Any advice? Yeah, please.
It's Superintendent Holmes County.
Yeah.
I just appreciate the extra money this year because it allowed us to give all our employees a raise for the first time in 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
Allowed us to buy some buses that were badly needed. It was just what it's done. We went out and toured the schools Friday with the board and myself, and there's a whole new, there's a lot of enthusiasm and almost like a little bit more hope. It's just made a huge difference. Not so much from it's not as much about the money part of it, it's just the recognition part of it, that they are working hard, they're doing the right things, they're trying to make children's lives better. And I just really appreciate that.
Well, and do you think I'm right that we got to fix this BAM system, the way we measure our teachers?
The BAM, it would take a physicist that is smart and calculus to figure that out. I can't figure that out.
I mean, what do you say to a teacher that comes and sits down to you and says, why am I not graded a good teacher when there's all these kids that their performance, I don't even know these kids, not even in my class.
You can't explain it.
Right.
It's just that, and you're taking our approach, simplify it, boil it down. It doesn't take, there's not many points that you have to hit to know if somebody's doing a good job.
Well, whenever we get more revenue, there's two places I like to put it, our schools and our roads, because those are investments that actually last. If we go build a road, well, after I'm gone, that road will still be there. If we invest in our kids, those kids have a future that continues. Those teachers, like you say, get real pride in the work they do. So, every extra dollar we get, that's what I'm trying to do.
We appreciate that.
Good, thank you. Y'all got any other? That was too easy.
I just got a comment I'd like to make on.
Well, first of all, you told me you weren't even going to stay for my talk. You were going to Dothan. So it was that you stayed for breakfast, didn't you?
Well, you were talking about pay raises.
All right, go ahead with that comment.
But I've had an idea on this. I taught school for 30 years, and I think you can take and put in a decent merit pay for teachers, scientists. Get in there and teach basic principles of science. Mathematics, teach basic math. There's no mystery about either one of them. They don't change that fast. Now, you're going to study social studies and some of these other things, they're changing around pretty rapidly. But there's several English, rules of English have changed all that fast. They still have 8 parts of speech. They had that 30 when I was in the elementary school. So it can be done.
Good. Well, I'm optimistic that we can do it too. There's a lot of folks that just say you can't do it. You got to pay everybody the same. But I don't really know that I agree with that. I mean, good doctors get paid better than bad doctors. Good lawyers get paid better than bad lawyers. And our very best teachers ought to get paid more. Because look, we've all had great teachers, but here's what most folks don't say. I bet you every one of us in here had a bad teacher here and there. That teacher that just goes in, puts on the film strip, gives you a worksheet at the end. Should that teacher be paid the same amount as that one that gets there early, makes sure the kids have breakfast, stays late to tutor with them? I don't think so. So thank you for the encouragement on it.
So how much involvement do the unions then have in the development of this system?
Well, we try. We always start being inclusive. And look, I'm never going to be the legislator of the year for any union, but I always think even when you disagree with folks, always better to have folks at the table. Well, unions started to say, well, when we just wanted to gauge on student performance, well, it's the whole school, so you got to take the whole school into account. Well, you got to take this into account, that into account. And when you have too much consensus, then you end up with this formula where, you take the test scores and divide it by the number of students and multiply by the number of craters on the moon and subtract your weight. I mean, we got this system that doesn't make any sense. So maybe we need to get some of our educators that are having to actually responsible to explain the system to teachers, come tell us what the simpler metrics are that can be used. That's the plan. Now that won't be, the idea that the unions think is the best, but ultimately it's what's best for the teachers and best for the students.
What type of, what have you got in store for helping the small businesses in the state? We got a lot of small businesses going out there.
Yeah, well, it doesn't help much when every time folks turn around, they got the DBPR, DEP, Department of Health coming with a different form, regulation, inspection, and I got a guy who's selling ice for 30 years in my district, and one day a fellow from the Department of Agriculture shows up and says, we got to get a new sign out front, you got to get new bags for the ice, you got to take the restaurant manager's exam. Before you take that exam, you got to take an online course, then you got to go to Tallahassee. At the end, the guy said, I don't want to sell the ice after having to do all this stuff. And so we got to look at targeted ways to remove those barriers. And then I think small businesses, they really need one thing above all else: customers. If you're a small business and you got a line out front, you can be successful. And if we have a state where the economy is growing, we're back to 1,000 people a day moving to Florida. I think that's going to help small businesses. Now, in the Panhandle, we don't market ourselves the same way that Orlando or Fort Lauderdale do. And so I think here, what will help small businesses is investing the money in economic development to try to bring in large projects, large manufacturing, large distribution, large logistics. And I think the more we do that, the more customers we create. So I know that's a complicated answer, but I think maybe what's more important is what I didn't say. I don't think that the answer is to have the government directly subsidizing a whole lot of small businesses. Because I'd be pretty angry if I was running a small business, competing against my neighbor down the block, and all of a sudden he had the government backing him and I didn't have the government backing me. That wouldn't be fair. So it's creating the right, I think, economic climate more than just a direct subsidy.
But there was, Marty did, working with your dad and some others, pass through legislation